They called it a joke. The ship wasn't meant to fly, let alone fight. The hull was a patchwork of rusted steel, scavenged panels, and obsolete plating that looked like it belonged in a museum. Its reactor core was 3 generations old, running on fuel cells. No sane Navy used anymore. Even its guns were mismatched, salvaged from old battlefields and bolted into place by desperate engineers who knew they were building trash. And yet this ship was mine. I stood on its bridge, a room barely holding together with exposed wires, flickering lights, and the constant hum of an overworked life support system, and looked out at the black ocean of stars. Officially, it was designated HSV-7 Redeemer. Unofficially, the fleet had given it another name, the dumbest warship in the galaxy. And maybe they were right. The Redeemer wasn't supposed to exist. She was the result of desperation. Humanity had lost too many wars against the alien coalitions. Every time we were outgunned, outnumbered, and underestimated, we'd build ships with sleek designs and powerful weapons only to see them blown apart within hours. The Redeemer was different. She wasn't built to impress. She wasn't built to win cleanly. She was built to survive, and I was the fool, dumb enough or stubborn enough to command her. The crew wasn't much better. Misfits, criminals, men who had nowhere else to go. Some had been court-martialed from better ships. Others were running from debts or punishments back home. And then there was me, Captain Adrian Hale. Not a decorated officer, not a brilliant strategist, just a man with too many scars and not enough options. I'd been offered the Redeemer. When no one else would take her, they said, "You'll be forgotten out there." They were wrong. Our first mission came without warning, a distress call from the frontier. One of our mining colonies had been attacked by a Draxian raiding fleet. Normally the Navy would have sent a proper battle group. Instead, they sent us a joke ship with a joke crew sent against an enemy that had slaughtered entire human colonies without mercy. I won't lie, my stomach turned when I saw the fleet waiting for us. Draxian cruisers, sleek and bristling with energy cannons, circling the planet like vultures around a corpse. Their ships were beautiful in a way that made me hate them. Elegant curves, polished alloys, weapon arrays that could vaporize us in a heartbeat. And then there was us, metal groaning, systems failing, alarms already blinking red before we'd even fired a shot. Captain, my first officer, growled, a man named Riker who looked like he'd been carved from stone. We don't stand chance. He wasn't wrong by every metric. This was suicide, but I wasn't about to roll over. Load everything we've got, I ordered. Missiles, torpedoes, even the ones we swore were unstable. If it can explode, I want it armed. The crew stared at me like I was insane. Maybe I was, but the Redeemer wasn't a ship built for clean tactics. She was ugly, dangerous, and unpredictable, just like humanity itself. The Draxians hailed us before the first shot was fired. Their commander appeared on the cracked view screen, sneering. With those reptilian fangs they were so proud of, a human garbage barge dares approach us, he hissed, pathetic, turn away or be annihilated. I leaned forward, letting him see the scar running down my face, the exhaustion in my eyes, the madness barely restrained behind them. We may be pathetic, I said, voice low and steady, but pathetic doesn't mean harmless. Then I cut the channel and gave the order. The first salvo roared from our mismatched launchers, dozens of Missiles, half of them decades old, some so unreliable I expected them to detonate in our own launch bays. They weren't smart, they weren't precise, but they were many. The Draxians laughed at us. I saw it in their maneuvers. They didn't even try to dodge. Why would they? Their shields could swat away primitive weapons like flies, but the Redeemer's missiles weren't normal. They were packed with unstable warheads, scavenged explosives, chemical warheads, and in some cases, literal barrels of fuel rigged to detonate. It wasn't about precision, it was about chaos, and chaos has a way of finding cracks. The first Draxian cruiser lit up in flames when 3 unstable warheads went off together, rupturing its shield. Matrix, another missile, dumb and blind, slammed into the exposed flank and turned the ship into a fireball. The rest of our salvo scattered like shrapnel across the battlefield, forcing the fleet into confusion. On the bridge of the Redeemer, my crew stared at the display in shock. 1 kill, 2 kills. The impossible was happening. Captain Archer muttered almost in disbelief. We're winning, I grinned, though my chest ached with the weight of it. No, I said, we're surviving. That's enough, but deep down I knew this was just the beginning. The dumbest warship in the galaxy had just made its first kill, and the galaxy was about to learn what a desperate human could do. The Redeemer smelled like sweat and burning circuit. That was the first thing I noticed when the battle settled into the uneasy silence that follows death. The sound of alarms had quieted, though they hadn't gone completely silent. Half our system still screamed for attention, but silence compared to the chaos a few minutes ago felt almost holy. We had just done the impossible. The galaxy's dumbest warship, a ship no one wanted, had crippled and destroyed 2 Draxian cruisers. Against all odds, against reason, against the very laws of common sense. But no one on my bridge was celebrating. Men sat stiffly in their chairs, staring at the screens as if afraid to blink. My first officer, Riker, leaned forward on the console, his knuckles white. The weapons officer kept whispering under his breath something like a prayer or maybe a curse, and I stood gripping the rail with such force that my palms ached, my heart hammering hard enough to make me lightheaded. I should have felt pride, triumph, victory. But instead, all I felt was dread, because the Draxians weren't finished, not by a long shot. Status report, I barked, forcing my voice into the steady growl of command. The crew jolted back into motion. Screens lit up with data, though much of it was red and flashing, weapons hot. But we lost 2 launch tubes too. Blowback, said Kane, our weapons officer. His voice carried the rough edge of panic, poorly hidden beneath professionalism. Another missile bay is jammed. Looks like the loader collapsed under the strain. I've got 6 torpedoes still viable, but if the casing's as old as it looks, I wouldn't trust them. Shields are at 20%, another voice shouted. Laru, our engineer. Reactors spiking every time we push past 80% thrust. I don't even know how. The core is still holding together. Life support is stable, said a quieter voice from the back. That was Juno, our medic. He was out of place on a bridge, but he liked to stay where the captain was during fight. Superstitious. Stable for now, he added. I nodded. Good enough. On the view screen, the Draxian fleet regrouped. They hadn't expected us to kill 2 of their cruisers. I could see the hesitation in their movements, the stutter in their formations. They weren't used to improvising. Their war doctrine was simple: overwhelm, crush, erase. When faced with something illogical, they faltered, but hesitation doesn't last forever. They're forming up, Riker said grimly. 5 ships left, they'll flank us in. Hammer us from every angle, not if we keep them off balance, I muttered, my hand clenched the railing tighter. The crew looked at me waiting. I could feel their fear, their exhaustion. Men who'd signed onto this ship, expecting to rot quietly in the void, had just killed enemies they were never meant to face. The weight of that hung in the air. They were looking at me not as their captain, but as the fool who had led them here. And I couldn't let them see my fear. Listen to me, I said, turning toward them, my voice cut through the hum of broken systems. They think we're weak. They think we're dumb. That's why we're still alive. We fight like humans, not like them. We fight dirty and we make sure they never forget what desperation looks like. So load whatever we've got left, even if it's garbage. We'll throw the whole damn ship at them if we have to. There was a moment of silence. Then Kane gave a crooked grin. Garbage I can do, Captain. The crew chuckled nervously, and just like that the fear shifted, not gone, but bent into something sharper. Fear became fuel. The Draxians didn't hail us this time. They were done with warnings. Their cruisers split into formation, 3 forward, 2 hanging back. Their weapons lit up, streaks of green and violet energy slashing across the void. Brace, Archer roared. The Redeemer shook like an old man coughing blood. Shields flared, failed, and flared again. Sparks rained from the ceiling. One of the consoles exploded, sending a crewman flying backward with a scream. Juno rushed to him without waiting for permission. Return fire, I barked. Missiles launched, fewer than before, but no less chaotic. They scattered like drunken birds, slamming into Draxian shields with reckless force. One detonated prematurely, another curved wide and missed everything but 3 hit solid. The enemy's shields wavered, then held. Damn it, Kane spat. The Draxians pressed forward, cannons hammering us mercilessly. The Redeemer shuddered under each blow. Alarms screamed. The floor shook beneath my boots. I thought the hull would tear open and suck us all into the void. And then I had an idea, a stupid idea. The kind of idea only a desperate man on a desperate ship could have. Riker, I said, leaning close so no one else heard the fear in my voice. Do we still have the external cargo clamps? He blinked, then nodded slowly. I, Captain, but they're barely functional. Good, prep them. We're going to grab one of their ships. His eyes widened. That's suicide. Everything we're doing is suicide. I snapped. Now get it done. We angled the Redeemer straight at the nearest cruiser. It loomed larger and larger on the screen, its cannons flaring. Every second felt like a hammer blow against my skull. The crew shouted, cursed, prayed. Riker's hands flew across the console. Cargo clamps ready, he said. Do it. The Redeemer slammed into the cruiser's side with a screech of tearing metal that reverberated through the hull. The clamps latched onto the enemy ship, locking us together like 2 beasts in a death struggle. Sparks cascaded across the screen. Warning lights flared red. Now, I shouted. We fired torpedoes point blank. The blast tore through the Draxian hull, ripping metal apart like paper. Flames bloomed in the vacuum. The cruiser convulsed, shuddered, then went dark. The Redeemer didn't escape unscathed. The explosion rattled us, knocked half the crew to the floor, and left our hull groaning as if it were about to split in two. But we were alive. The Draxian ship wasn't. "That's three," Kane whispered, staring at the wreckage. His face was pale, his hands trembling. "3 kills." The remaining cruisers hesitated again. For the second time in the same battle, the mighty Draxians faltered before a rusted human wreck. "Captain," Riker said, his voice almost reverent. "They're afraid of us, afraid." The word tasted strange. Aliens who had slaughtered billions, who had reduced human colonies to ash, were afraid of us, of me, of my crew, of the dumbest warship ever built. But fear only lasts so long. The 2 rear cruisers surged forward, firing everything they had. One of their blasts sheared off our portside stabilizer. Another struck our reactor shielding, sending the entire bridge into darkness for 3 terrifying seconds before emergency power kicked in. "We can't take much more," Lara shouted from engineering. "The core is going to blow if we keep pushing it." I clenched my jaw, staring at the screen. 2 cruisers left. If we died now, everything we'd done would mean nothing. "Captain," Kane said suddenly, his voice unsteady, "there's 1 missile left. Big one, the one we swore we'd never touch." My stomach tightened. I knew the one he meant, an experimental warhead built from unstable materials no sane commander would use. It could detonate in the launch bay just as easily as in space. It was suicide in a casing, but suicide was already breathing down our necks. "Loaded," I said. The crew went silent. Even Riker stared at me like I'd lost my mind, but no one disobeyed. Kane's hands shook as he armed the missile. The lights flickered. Systems screamed. The Draxians bore down on us, their weapons charging for the killing blow. "Target their flagship," I ordered, "and pray to whatever god still listened to humans." The Redeemer shuddered as the missile launched. It spun erratically, its guidance failing almost immediately. For a heartbeat, I thought it would veer off into the void and vanish, but then, by some miracle or curse, it steadied. It slammed into the Draxian flagship with a light so bright the viewscreen dimmed automatically. For a moment there was nothing but white. Then came the shock wave. The flagship disintegrated, not exploded, not crippled. It simply ceased to exist, torn apart atom by atom in a cascade of unstable energy. The smaller cruiser beside it was ripped in half by the wave, gutted like a fish. And then there was silence. On the bridge of the Redeemer, no one spoke, no one breathed. We just stared at the wreckage, at the impossible truth in front of us. Draxian fleet was gone. We had won. I sank into my chair, my body trembling, my mind numb. Victory tasted like ash in my mouth. We had survived, yes, but at what cost? The Redeemer was barely holding together. The crew was shaken, injured, terrified, and somewhere deep in my gut, I knew this wasn't the end, because the galaxy would hear about this, and once they did, they would come for us. The Redeemer limped through space like a dying beast. The battle was over, the Draxians destroyed, but survival didn't mean safety. Our hull was torn open in 3 places, patched only by emergency force fields that flickered whenever the reactor coughed. Half the ship smelled of ozone and blood. Fires had been smothered, but the smoke still hung thick in the corridors. I walked those corridors after the Fight boots echoing against steel. Crewmen looked at me as I passed, some with awe, some with fear, most with exhaustion etched deep into their faces. They'd signed on to rot on the edge of nowhere, not to take on a Draxian fleet, and live to tell the tale. One man. Nolan stopped me. His arm was bandaged, blood still soaking through. He tried to salute, but his hand shook too badly. "Captain," he rasped, eyes wide, "did that really happen? Did we kill them all?" I put a hand on his shoulder, squeezing hard enough for him to feel I was real. "Yes," I said quietly, "we killed them all." He swallowed, his throat bobbing, relief mixed with horror in his eyes. "Then they'll come for us, won't they?" I didn't answer because we both knew the truth. Back on the bridge, Riker was already pacing like a caged animal. He'd been my first officer for only 6 months, but the man was carved out of stubborn stone. He'd fought in the early years of the war, seen what the Draxians did to colonies, and carried that rage in his bones. "Captain," he said the moment I stepped onto the bridge, "we need to get out of here now before another fleet drops in." "We can't run," I said, "not like this. The reactor won't hold at full thrust. Engineering already warned me. We push her too hard, she'll blow." His jaw tightened. "So what? We sit here and wait for them to find us." I looked at the wreckage outside the viewport. Shattered cruisers drifted like corpses, their burning husks painting the stars orange. The mining colony below was safe. For now, humanity would call it a victory, maybe the first real one in years. But victories are invitations. The Draxians wouldn't let this insult go unanswered. "We hold," I said finally. "We repair what we can, and then we make them chase us on our terms." Riker swore under his breath, but he didn't argue. He knew I was right. The days that followed were filled with smoke, blood, and sweat. The Redeemer wasn't a ship you repaired so much as kept alive through stubborn will. Laru and his engineering crew crawled through every duct, sealing breaches with scrap metal, rerouting power through wires that glowed red-hot. Kane oversaw the missile bays, stripping down half of what we had left to make 1 or 2 barely reliable launchers. And me. I walked among them, not as a captain issuing orders, but as a man standing shoulder to shoulder with his crew. I carried debris. I patched holes. I held down screaming men as Juno stitched their wounds because I needed them to. See, I wasn't above the suffering. I was part of it, but in the quiet moments when I sat alone in my quarters staring at the cracked mirror, doubt clawed at me. We'd won, yes, but had we doomed ourselves in the process? The answer came sooner than I wanted. It started with a transmission, not human, not Draxian, but from a neutral relay station orbiting a barren moon. The comms officer brought it to me with trembling hands. "Captain," he said, "you'll want to see this." The message flickered onto the view screen, a grainy recording us, the Redeemer tearing through the Draxian fleet in fire and chaos. Someone had been watching. Someone had broadcasted. And now it was spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. I watched myself giving the order to fire, watched the flagship vanish in that impossible white blast, watched the dumbest ship in the galaxy carve history into the stars. Then came the commentary. Alien voices, anger, fear. Humans should not possess such weapons. This was no strategy, it was madness. Find that ship, destroy it, crush this insult before it spreads. The crew sat in Silence as the voices faded, the weight of what we'd done pressed down like gravity. They know, Kane whispered. The whole galaxy knows. Riker turned to me, his face grim. We've just painted a target the size of Earth on our backs. He was right, but there was something else in those transmissions, something the crew hadn't noticed. Beneath the fear and rage there was respect, not admiration. Not yet, but respect for the fact that the weakest, dumbest ship had accomplished the unthinkable. That seed of respect mattered, because respect grows into fear, and fear can change the course of wars. The galaxy didn't wait long to respond. 2 days later, scouts picked up signals on long-range sensors, not Draxian but Coalition, another alien faction. Different species, same hatred of humanity. They weren't coming to fight. They were coming to study, to watch the Redeemer, to learn our tricks, and then to wipe us out before the idea of us spread too far. Scouts only, Riker muttered, staring at the readings. They're probing us, testing us. They'll call in reinforcements once they see how broken we are, Laru added. His face was smeared with grease and exhaustion. He wasn't wrong. We had two choices, run or fight with what little we had left. The crew looked at me, waiting. Every fiber of my body screamed to run, to limp away into the void and vanish before the galaxy crushed us, but running wouldn't stop them. Running would make us prey. We fight, I said. My voice was steady, even if my hands weren't, but not like before. No broadside battles, no suicide charges. We fight smart. We fight dirty. We fight like the galaxy already believes we do. When the scouts arrived, the Redeemer was waiting. They were sleek ships, fast and quiet, their holes designed for stealth. They circled us like sharks testing a wounded whale. Let them circle, I murmured. Give them the show they want. Kine's hands danced over the weapons console. We didn't fire missiles, not yet. We let the scouts think we were broken. Bleeding, helpless, they drew closer, emboldened by our silence, and then we sprung the trap. The Redeemer's cargo bays opened, not to release weapons but debris, scrap metal, broken panels, even the shattered remains of old missiles. Cloud of junk spewed into space, scattering in every direction. Scouts darted through it, confident, their superior maneuvering, until the debris exploded. Laru had wired it with crude detonators, not strong enough to destroy, but strong enough to. An NBSB. 2 scouts vanished in bursts of flame. The third staggered, its shields flickering. That was when Kane fired the last of our torpedoes, slamming it out of existence. The battle lasted minutes. When it ended, the void was littered with fragments of what once were scouts. The crew cheered weakly, but I didn't smile because I knew the truth. Scouts weren't the threat. Scouts were the bait. The real hunt was coming. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat on the bridge alone, staring at the stars. My reflection in the cracked view screen looked older than I remembered. Lines carved into my face, eyes sunken. I thought of Earth, of the colonies, of the people who had no idea what we'd just done out here. Did they still believe we were losing? Did they even care anymore? A voice broke the silence. Riker, standing in the doorway. You're carrying too much, he said. I didn't turn. I'm the captain. That's my job. He stepped closer. Your job is to keep us alive. And you've done that, but don't fool yourself. This ship isn't surviving because of steel and wires. It's surviving because of us. the crew men, who should have been forgotten. Misfits, criminals, the unwanted, and yet here we are still breathing, still fighting. I finally looked at him, his eyes burned with something I hadn't seen before, not just anger, not just loyalty, but belief. You think we can win? I said quietly. He nodded once. I think the galaxy's about to learn what happens when it underestimates men with nothing left to lose. His words struck deeper than he knew. Because he was right, we weren't fighting with the best ship, we weren't fighting with the best weapons. We were fighting with the raw, desperate will of men the galaxy had already written off. And maybe that was our greatest weapon. The next morning, we received another transmission, not from enemies, from humans. A fleet commander's face appeared on the screen, eyes wide, voice trembling with disbelief. Redeemer, this is Admiral Voskin. The entire fleet has seen the footage. Command wants to know, how in God's name did you survive? How did you win? I leaned forward, staring into his eyes. We survived, I said, because we fought like humans, ugly, desperate, unpredictable, and we'll keep surviving. Tell Command that if the galaxy wants us gone, they'll have to burn every last star to do it. The Admiral said nothing, but the look in his eyes told me everything. For the first time in years, humanity had hope, not clean hope, not noble hope, but raw, brutal hope forged in chaos, and it terrified me because hope demands more battles, and the Redeemer wasn't done bleeding yet. The Redeemer had become a story in every bar, on every backwater colony. Smugglers whispered about the dumb human warship that had torn a Draxian fleet to pieces. Traders carried the tale across star lanes, adding their own flourishes. Some said we were a ghost ship, others swore our captain was insane enough to feed prisoners into the reactor to keep it burning. Rumors twisted the truth, but the core remained. A rusted, broken relic had humiliated the galaxy's most feared killers. Stories spread faster than ships, and stories bring hunters. 3 weeks after the Draxian massacre, the real retaliation came. It started with silence, the kind of silence that makes your bones ache, like the stars themselves were holding their breath. Our long-range sensors went dark one by one, fried by interference we couldn't trace. Then came the faint echoes, gravity signatures, dozens of them moving in formation. Riker stared at the readings, his jaw tight. That's no scout wing, no. I said, my throat dry. That's a fleet. And it was. When they broke the void hours later, the Redeemer's cracked view screen filled with the impossible sight of a coalition task force, 10 warships each, the size of a city, bristling with weapons. Their hulls gleamed with polished alloy, shields shimmering like oceans of light. We were one ship, one broken, limping ship, and yet they came with 10. That told me something. It told me they weren't here to fight a battle. They were here to make an example. The crew gathered on the bridge, faces pale, eyes hard. They're going to crush us, Kane muttered. His hands shook as he adjusted the missile console. They brought enough firepower to erase a planet for us. They're afraid, Laru growled, wiping grease from his face. That's why they brought 10. They're terrified of us. Fear doesn't matter when they've got that kind of firepower, Juno said, his voice quiet but steady. We can't win this. I let them argue for a moment, let their fear spill out, because I knew they needed to taste it before I cut it down. Listen To me, I said, my voice sharp enough to cut steel. We don't win this fight by matching them. We can't. We win by surviving, by showing them again that the dumbest ship in the galaxy can't be killed. That's how we win. Riker turned toward me, his eyes searching. You have a plan, Captain? Not yet, I admitted, but I will. When the first salvo came, it was like being hit by God. Beams of energy lanced across the void, slamming into our shields. The Redeemer shook violently, the deck tilting under my boots. Consoles sparked, men shouted, alarms screamed. Shields at 15%, Laru roared. We can't take another hit like that. Then we don't take it, I snapped. Helm. Evasive maneuvers. The Redeemer groaned as we rolled clumsily through space, dodging blasts that should have vaporized us. We weren't fast, we weren't sleek, but we were unpredictable. And sometimes unpredictability was enough. Kane returned fire. Missiles streaked out wild and scattered. Most detonated harmlessly against enemy shields, but just one slipped through, slamming into a cruiser's flank. The explosion wasn't enough to an NBSP and NBSP. But it staggered, and in that stagger I saw hope. They're not invincible, I said. They can bleed. Hours blurred into chaos. The fleet pressed us, hemming us in with disciplined precision. We darted between their formations, throwing every trick we had. Debris fields unstable, warheads, sudden reactor surges that made our signature flare like a supernova before vanishing. We weren't fighting to destroy them, we were fighting to humiliate them, and it worked. Their shots grew more frantic, their formations sloppier. We were a rusted ghost slipping through their teeth, mocking them with every near miss, every unexpected counterattack. But every maneuver cost us. The Redeemer bled with each pass, hull plates torn away, systems fried, men killed at their posts. I watched one of my crewmen, barely 20, burned alive when a console exploded. Juno couldn't even look at me. Afterward, by the 5th hour, the Redeemer was a corpse being dragged through hell. That was when the idea came. It wasn't brilliance, it wasn't strategy, it was desperation. Pure and simple. Riker, I said hoarsely, my throat from shouting, do we still have the mining charges from the colony? He blinked, then swore, you mean the ones we stripped out for salvage? Yes. They're not weapons, Captain, they're industrial explosives designed to crack asteroids. Exactly, I said, set them up in the debris field. His eyes widened, then slowly he grinned, a minefield. We lured the fleet into the wreckage of their own fallen cruisers, a graveyard of burning metal, twisted steel and drifting corpses. The Coalition thought they had us cornered, thought they were closing the trap. Instead, we closed it on them. The first mining charge detonated beneath destroyer's belly, tearing through its shields and splitting it open like a rotten fruit. The second went off near a battleship's engines, crippling it instantly. The void became fire, ships scattered, formations shattered, comms filled with alien panic. Detonate the rest, I roared, one by one. The charges went off, turning the graveyard into a killing field. Coalition ships burned, staggered, collided with one another in their desperation to escape. The Redeemer floated at the heart of it, battered and broken but alive. When the smoke cleared, 3 enemy ships were gone. 2 more were crippled, and we were still here. The crew erupted into cheers, but I didn't join them. My chest ached not from injury, but from the weight of what? I knew this wasn't victory, this was survival, and survival came at a cost. I looked around the bridge. Men slumped in their chairs, bloodied and burned. The walls were blackened with smoke. The ship groaned like a dying animal, and yet the fire in their eyes, the belief, the defiance. We were becoming more than a ship. We were becoming a symbol. Hours later, when the wreckage drifted silent, we received another transmission, not from the fleet, from the galaxy, 1,000 channels all at once, news feeds, smugglers, rebels, soldiers. The Redeemer's battle had been broadcast, again carried across the stars. Dumbest warship in the galaxy, humbling. A fleet 10 times its size, and the message was clear: humans could not be erased. Riker stood beside me as we watched the feeds. He was silent for a long time, then finally spoke. They're going to throw everything at us now, he said quietly. Yes, I agreed. And we'll keep surviving. I turned to him. His face was tired, scarred but burning with the same fire. I felt in my bones. Maybe, I said, or maybe we die out here. But if we do, the galaxy will remember us. They'll remember the dumbest ship they couldn't kill. And for the first time since the war began, I believed it. The Redeemer was no longer a ship. It was a ghost story. Every channel in the galaxy carried our name now. Merchants whispered about us over drinks. Soldiers told their children bedtime stories about the rusted warship that had humiliated entire fleets. Some said we were blessed by gods, others swore we were cursed, a harbinger of chaos that would drag everyone down with us. But all agreed on one thing: the Redeemer could not be killed, and that was dangerous, because nothing draws fire like a symbol. When the message from Earth finally came, it was not celebration. It was fear. The transmission flickered onto the cracked screen of my quarters. Late one night, the Admiralty's crest appeared first, then the face of Admiral Voskin. His voice was clipped, formal, the voice of a man carrying orders he didn't agree with. Captain Adrian Hale of the HSV-7. Redeemer, he began, your actions have not gone unnoticed. You have inflicted unprecedented casualties upon the coalition. Your victories have inspired our people, but that word landed like a hammer. The Redeemer has also drawn too much attention. Our intelligence reports that the coalition has formed an alliance of fleets solely dedicated to hunting your ship down. If you remain active, you will become the focal point of this war, and humanity cannot afford that. I stared at the screen, my fists clenching. So what are you saying, Admiral? Voskin's eyes flicked downward just for a moment before he met mine again. You are ordered to return to Earth immediately. The Redeemer will be decommissioned, your crew reassigned. This order is final. The screen went black. I sat there in silence, the words echoing in my skull. Decommissioned, reassigned. They wanted to kill the Redeemer themselves before the enemy could. They were afraid, not of our weakness, but of our strength. I should have smashed the console. I should have cursed Voskin's name. Instead, I just sat there staring at the dark screen until Riker found me. He didn't knock. He never did. He stepped inside, his broad frame filling the doorway. Orders came through. Yes, they want us dead, don't they? Not in those words. I looked up at him. They want us home. Grounded, buried. Riker's lip curled. Figures, commands, always been more afraid of its own men than the enemy. I didn't answer because part of me understood the Redeemer was chaos. Incarnate, a symbol no admiral could control if humanity rallied around us. The admiral's grip would weaken, and men like Voskin valued control more than victory. I called the crew together the next morning. We gathered in the mess hall, place that still smelled of smoke from the last fire we'd barely put out. The men looked at me with the same mix of trust and fear they always did. They were waiting for orders. They want us home, I said simply. Admiralty has ordered us to return to Earth. The Redeemer will be decommissioned, will be reassigned. The room went silent, then Kane slammed his fist onto the table. Decommissioned, after everything we've done, after everything we've survived. They're afraid, Laru spat, his voice full of disgust. Afraid of us, afraid of what we've proven. Juno's voice was quieter. Maybe they're right, maybe we've pushed too far, survived too much. Maybe it's time to stop. Room turned on him instantly. Voices rose, curses spat. I raised a hand, silencing them. Listen, I said, we have a choice. We obey. We go home, let them bury the Redeemer, and we fade into memory. Or I looked around the room, meeting every pair of eyes. We disobey. We keep fighting. We stay out here in the dark, and we show the galaxy that humanity doesn't kneel, not to aliens, not to admirals, not to anyone. Silence that followed was heavier than steel. Recur broke at first. You already know my vote, Captain. I'd rather die out here than rot behind a desk. Kane nodded fiercely. Same. One by one, heads turned, voices joined. Not all. Juno stayed silent, eyes downcast, but most enough. The Redeemer wasn't going home. Word spread fast, though not by us. The Admiral's order leaked, twisted by smugglers and rebels into a story of betrayal. The tale became that humanity's leaders had tried to kill the Redeemer out of jealousy, that they feared her more than the aliens did, and suddenly we weren't just a ship, we were a cause. Messages poured in from colonies and resistance cells, offers of supplies, of recruits, of allegiance. Men and women who had lost faith in Earth's Navy now swore they would follow the Redeemer instead. For the first time I realized the truth. We weren't just fighting for survival anymore. We were building a rebellion, but rebellion breeds enemies on every side. 2 weeks later, as we limped through a desolate system of dead stars, Riker found me on the bridge, his face grim. Captain, he said, we've got a problem. What now? He handed me data pad. I scanned it, my stomach tightening with every line. It was a transmission intercepted by our comms. Officer, not from the Coalition, from Earth, a bounty on me, on my crew, on the Redeemer. Alive if possible, dead if convenient. I set the pad down slowly. My hands didn't shake, but only because I forced them not to. So it's official, I said quietly. We're traitors now, not traitors, Archer said, his voice low and fierce. Symbols, they can't control us, so they'll try to kill us, but that just proves we're right. I wished I could believe his fire, but in the pit of my stomach, I knew what this meant. We weren't just hunted by aliens now, we were hunted by our own. The crew took the news badly. Some raged, some laughed bitterly, and some faltered. Juno cornered me in the medbay that night, his hands trembling. Adrian, he said, he was one of the few who still used my first name. This isn't war anymore. This is suicide. We Can't fight everyone, we can't fight. Forever. I stared at him. He wasn't wrong, but I couldn't let him see the doubt gnawing at me. We're not fighting forever, I said. We're fighting long enough to matter, long enough to show them we won't be erased. His eyes filled with something like sorrow. And when you're dead, when we're all dead, will that matter? I didn't answer, because I didn't know. That night's sleep came slow. When it did, it came with dreams of fire. I saw the Redeemer burning, my crew screaming, the void swallowing us whole, and above it all, laughter not alien but human, the laughter of admirals watching their problem solve itself. I woke with sweat on my skin and anger in my chest. They wanted us forgotten, erased, but we would not go quietly. If the galaxy wanted to make us outlaws, then we would be outlaws. If Earth wanted us traitors, then we would be traitors. And if the coalition wanted us dead, then they'd have to burn half the stars to do it. The Redeemer wasn't just a ship anymore. She was defiance given steel and fire. And I swore that as long as I breathed, she would keep burning. The Redeemer was quieter than usual, not the good kind of quiet, the calm after battle, the hush of exhausted men catching their breath. No, this was the uneasy quiet of suspicion, of conversations cut short when I walked by, of glances exchanged in shadowed corners, the kind of quiet that eats at a captain's bones. It had been 3 weeks since Earth branded us traitors, 3 weeks since command put a bounty on our heads. We'd survived by slipping through backwater systems, scavenging fuel and supplies from smugglers who saw us as legends rather than outlaws. To the colonies we were heroes, to Earth criminals, to the aliens nightmares. But legends don't feed hungry men, and outlaws don't live long. My crew was fraying. I could see it in their eyes. The hope that had carried them through the last battles was wearing thin, replaced by the grinding weight of endless war. Men who had followed me without hesitation now muttered behind my back. And then one night, Riker came to me. "They're talking mutiny," he said flatly. I stared at him, the words like a blade in my gut. "Who?" He shook his head. "Not sure yet. But it's more than one. They're scared. Adrian, scared of command, scared of the bounty, scared of dying out here with nothing but rust holding this ship together. Some of them are saying we should surrender, turn the Redeemer in, take pardon and a prison sentence instead of a grave." The word stung more than enemy fire ever could. "Do you believe that?" Riker's jaw tightened. "I believe men are only loyal until hunger and fear drown out everything else. You've given them victories, Captain, but victories don't matter if they think we're doomed. Anyway, I couldn't sleep after that. I wandered the ship's halls in silence, past bulkheads scarred by fire, past men curled up in hammocks with hollow cheeks and restless dreams. I'd fought fleets, outmaneuvered admirals, defied gods themselves, or so the stories claimed. But mutiny was a knife in the dark, and I knew it was coming. It started small, a weapons locker found unlocked, a transmission jammed before reaching me, men vanishing from duty, shifts claiming exhaustion. I tried to ignore it, to pretend it was just the Redeemer's usual chaos. But deep down I knew the storm broke. During a supply run, we docked with a smuggler's outpost on the edge of nowhere, a hollowed asteroid filled with black market traders and mercenaries too desperate to care who they sold to. We took on fuel rations, even a handful of replacement parts, but when we were ready to depart, half my crew didn't return. I stormed through the docking bay, fury boiling in my chest. Riker met me halfway, his face dark. They've gone, he said. Walked off, said they're done. Following a dead man in a dead ship. How many? I demanded. 20 maybe. More, I clenched my fists. 20 men. Quarter of my crew gone, but that wasn't the worst of it. When we pulled away from the outpost, one of the smugglers sent us a message. Grainy footage passed hand to hand until it reached me. The deserters sitting in a smoky tavern, laughing with strangers, drunk loud, careless, and in their drunkenness they spoke about the Redeemer's weaknesses, about our lack of supplies, about the bounty Earth had placed on our heads. They told everything, and that was betrayal. I smashed the console, sparks flying. The crew watched me in silence, waiting for my reaction. They've doomed us, I said finally, my voice raw. They've sold us to the highest bidder. Kane spat on the floor. Cowards. I'll kill them myself if I ever see them again. But Juno, the medic, looked away. His silence was louder than words, and that's when I knew some of the betrayal wasn't gone with the deserters. It was still here, festering inside my ship. The attack came 3 nights later. I was asleep in my quarters when the first blast rocked the Redeemer, not from outside, from inside. Explosives in the starboard engine room, tearing through bulkheads, shattering systems. Alarm screamed as fire spread. I bolted upright, grabbed my sidearm, and sprinted into the chaos. Smoke filled the corridors. Men shouted, some fighting the fire, others drawing weapons against their own crewmates. Mutiny. The first traitor I faced was a man named Harlow. He'd served under me since the beginning. A quiet man, efficient with repairs, never one for conversation. Now he stood in the corridor with a rifle, his face pale but determined. Don't do this, Harlow, I said, my weapon steady in my hand. You don't get it, Captain, he spat. We're dead already. Command's hunting us. The aliens are hunting us. You've turned us into ghosts. I won't die for your pride. This isn't pride, I growled. It's survival, it's defiance. He shook his head. No, it's madness. He raised his rifle. I fired first. Blast echoed through the corridor. Harlow fell, smoke curling from the hole in his chest. I didn't stop to look at him. I couldn't. The fighting spread through the ship like wildfire. Traitors against loyalists. The Redeemer tearing herself apart from within. Riker fought at my side, his axe-like fists breaking bones as easily as steel. Kane fired missiles point blank into barricaded halls, laughing like a madman. Laru rigged bulkhead doors to slam shut, trapping mutineers in smoke-filled rooms until they suffocated. But we paid for every inch. Men I trusted, men I'd bled with, now lay dead at my feet. By dawn, or what passed for dawn in the void, the mutiny was over. The loyal stood, the traitors burned, but the cost was heavy. 30 men dead, dozens more wounded. The Redeemer groaned under the damage of her own crew's rebellion. And me, I was hollow. Afterward, I sat in the captain's chair, staring at the blood smeared across my hands. They'll keep trying, Riker said quietly. His voice was steady, but his eyes were tired. As long as there's fear, as long as there's doubt, someone will turn against you. I know, I said. Then what do we do? I looked out at the stars, at the endless void that wanted us gone. My voice came low, steady like the growl of the Redeemer's dying engines. We show them what happens to traitors. We show them that fear doesn't save you. Only fire does. Riker nodded once. And if command or the aliens come knocking, then we burn them too. But that night, alone in my quarters, I finally let the mask slip. I poured a drink, hands trembling, and stared at the cracked mirror. My reflection looked older than ever, tired, broken. The Redeemer was bleeding. My crew was dwindling. My enemies were multiplying. And inside me, doubt whispered like a poison. Maybe the traitors were right. Maybe this was madness. But then I thought of the colonies, of the faces I'd seen in transmissions, the children smiling when they heard our name, the rebels who swore we gave them hope. Maybe I was mad, but better a madman who fought than a coward who surrendered. And so I raised my glass to the stars, my voice barely above a whisper. To the dumbest warship in the galaxy, I said, may she burn until the void itself remembers our name. The Redeemer was bleeding. Steel groaned with every breath of the reactor. Smoke clung to the halls like a second skin. We'd survived mutiny, but it had gutted us more deeply than any Draxian cannon ever could. The dead were buried in the void. No words, no ceremony, just bodies drifting into darkness, swallowed by the endless black that waited for us all. And yet word of our survival spread again. Not the mutiny, those whispers we smothered before they left the hull, but the fact that we were still alive. The dumbest warship in the galaxy refused to die, and the galaxy could no longer tolerate that insult. The warning came from smugglers. Desperate ping across encrypted channels, carried by men who owed us their lives. Captain Hale, the voice rasped. They're coming, not a patrol, not a fleet, all of them, every alien banner. Every ship that still remembers human defiance. They're not fighting each other anymore, not until you're gone. The transmission ended there, cut short, before the sender's ship was vaporized. But it was enough. The aliens had united, not against humanity, against us. When I told the crew, the silence was heavier than any explosion. How many? Kane asked, his voice like gravel. Hundreds, I said. Maybe thousands, more than we've ever faced. Then it's over, Juno whispered. His hands trembled on the table. We can't survive that. No, I said, my voice was low, steady. We can't survive it. But we can make sure they never forget us. We can bleed them so badly that the story of this ship lasts until the end of time. Riker leaned forward, his scarred face lit by the dim glow of the meshal lamps. One last fight. Yes, I said, one last fight. The Redeemer limped to the edge of a dead system, a place the charts had abandoned centuries ago, a graveyard of shattered moons. A star burned out into a cold ember, the perfect place for legends to die. We prepared as best we could. Laru scavenged every ounce of fuel, our rooting power through blackened conduits. Kane stripped the missile bays, wiring unstable warheads into suicide salvos. Riker drilled the men, what was left of them, until their hands bled. I walked among them, feeling their eyes on me. They knew this was the end, and yet not one asked to leave, not after the mutiny. Those who remained were loyal to the bone, not to me, not even to humanity. To the Redeemer, the fleet came like a storm. First their scouts sleek in silver, their signals screaming across the void, then their destroyers, then their cruisers, then the great capital Ships, monsters of alloy and fire, bristling with weapons that could erase cities. They blotted out the stars. The crew fell silent on the bridge. "Ricker," I said, my voice calm though. My chest thundered. "Sound the call." He nodded. A deep klaxon roared through the ship, echoing in every hall, every chamber. Men tightened their harnesses. Weapons hummed to life. "This is it," I said, my voice carried across the comms, reaching every man. Aboard, they brought an empire to kill us. One ship, one broken ship. That's what they think we are, so let's show them the truth. Let's show them what the dumbest warship in the galaxy can do. The cheers that followed weren't loud. They were guttural, primal, the sound of men too tired to hope but too stubborn to kneel. The first salvo lit the void. Alien cannons flared, streaks of green and violet cutting across the black. The Redeemer rolled, shields flaring and collapsing in the same breath. The deck shook, sparks rained, consoles screamed. "Return fire," I roared. Kane's hands flew, missiles streaked into the storm. Wild, erratic, chaotic, half detonated. Too early, lighting the void with useless fire, but the other half found marks. An enemy destroyer staggered. Cruiser shields cracked. The Redeemer danced like a drunk in a knife fight. Weaving through fire, she should never have survived. Every time we should have died, we lived. Every time they thought us crippled, we struck back, and the fleet began to falter. Hours blurred into agony. The Redeemer bled from every seam. Fires burned unchecked in the lower decks. Men screamed through smoke and steel. Juno stitched wounds with shaking hands. His face blackened with soot, but the kills mounted. One destroyer, two, a cruiser, then another. The dumbest warship in the galaxy was carving gods into corpses. By the fifth hour, the Redeemer was half dead. The reactor howled like a wounded beast. Half the weapons were gone. Riker staggered at my side, his face blooded. One arm limp. Kane coughed blood onto his console, but refused to stop firing. And still they came. Hundreds of them, thousands. "We can't hold," Riker rasped. "No," I said. My eyes burned with smoke and fury. "But we can burn." That was when I gave the order that would damn us. "Laru," I said into the comms, "overload the reactor." His voice cracked through the static. "Captain, do it. Rig it to blow and give me control." Silence. Then I, "Captain." Riker turned to me, his eyes wide. "Adrian, this ship doesn't die quietly," I said. "If we burn, we take them with us." Redeemer's lights dimmed as power shifted. The hull groaned metal, straining against forces it was never meant to hold. Warning screamed across every console, and yet for the first time I felt calm. I looked at my crew, broken, bloodied, loyal beyond reason. "This is it," I said softly. "One last laugh, one last fire." Kane grinned through blood. Riker straightened, his good hand clenching into a fist. Even Juno, pale and silent, nodded once. The Redeemer charged. We plunged into the heart of the fleet, through fire and flame, weaving between ships 10 times our size. Missiles flared from our dying launchers. Enemy ships staggered, shields buckled, hulls split. And then, when the fleet surrounded us, when their weapons lit the void with the power to erase us, I triggered the core. The Redeemer burned brighter than a star. The reactor tore free, screaming energy into the void. Fire engulfed the fleet, ripping through shields, shattering hulls, consuming thousands in a single breath. The void howled with light, and in that light the Redeemer vanished. Some say we died there. That The Redeemer was nothing but ash in the storm, but others whispered different. That in the chaos, a broken silhouette slipped away, that the dumbest warship in the galaxy still roams the stars, half dead, half legend, waiting for the next fleet foolish enough to forget her name. I can't tell you which story is true, but I can tell you this. The Redeemer will never be forgotten, not while men remember defiance, not while the galaxy remembers fear, and not while the stars still burn. The void was silent after the blast. For hours nothing stirred but the drifting wreckage of ships that had once blotted out the stars. Capital vessels split in half, their reactors frozen in cold dead fire, cruisers reduced to molten slag, the carcasses of destroyers drifting aimlessly, their lights gone, their crews dust in the dark, and at the center of it all, the place where the Redeemer had been, was nothing but blinding white scars scorched into the fabric of space. The fleet that had come to erase us was gone, not crippled, not scattered, gone, burned out of existence in one breath. The galaxy would remember that light for generations, but no one knew for certain what had happened to us. Some said the Redeemer had perished in that storm, consumed by her own fury, that she had given her last scream of defiance and vanished, her crew martyrs to a cause too stubborn to die quietly. Others swore differently. Smugglers whispered of seeing a shadow limping from the wreckage, a broken ship, lights flickering, crawling into the dark like a wounded animal refusing the hunters mercy. And then there were the transmissions, faint, garbled, impossible to trace, a voice echoing through the void, distorted but unmistakably human. The dumbest warship in the galaxy still burns, come find us. But I was there, I know the truth. When I triggered the core, I thought it was the end. The reactor screamed, light devoured the bridge, and I felt the heat of death on my skin. Men shouted, prayed, cursed, but I heard none of it. There was only the roar of the Redeemer dying. Then darkness. I opened my eyes to smoke and silence. The bridge was half collapsed, consoles shattered, fires guttering in the low oxygen. My chest burned with every breath. Riker lay slumped against the rail, blood pouring from his skull, but his eyes flickered open when I touched him. Still here, he rasped. Still here, I said. Kane was gone. I found what was left of him fused to the weapon's console. His grin burned into ash. Laru was missing, his last act, no doubt, keeping the reactor from tearing us apart completely. Juno sat against the wall, his chest rising shallow, his hands still red with the blood of men he couldn't save. Half my crew was gone, the other half scattered across burning decks, wounded, broken, but alive. And so was the Redeemer. Barely. She was no longer a ship, she was a carcass held together by willpower and rust. Hull plates peeled away like flesh. Reactors sputtered with dying embers. Engines screamed with every twitch. We couldn't fight, we couldn't even fly. But we weren't dead, and that was enough. The fleet was gone, but others would come, scouts, scavengers, vultures. The galaxy would want proof of our death. They would comb this graveyard until they were certain that Redeemer was ash. I gathered what men I could on the shattered bridge. Faces smeared with blood, eyes hollow but burning. This isn't over, I told them. My voice was cracked, raw but steady. They think we're dead. Good, let them think it. We'll crawl into the dark, disappear into the void. We'll rebuild, and when they forget, we'll remind them. Riker coughed a laugh that turned into blood. You're mad, Captain. Always have been, I said, and the men smiled, broken, bleeding, half mad. Themselves, but they smiled. The days that followed blurred into agony. We worked in the cold silence of a graveyard, scavenging what we could from the wrecks around us, alien alloys torn into jagged shards, power cells sparking with unstable energy, weapons half-melted but salvageable. We stripped it all, patching the Redeemer's wounds with the bones of our enemies. Every weld was a prayer, every repair a curse. The ship groaned like a dying man, refusing to lie down, but slowly, piece by piece, she lived, not whole, not strong, but alive. And in that time the story spread, the colonies heard of the fleet's destruction and believed we had sacrificed ourselves to save them. They lit candles in our name, sang songs of the Redeemer's fire, Earth's command, buried our records, tried to erase us. But the void carried whispers faster than orders, smugglers, rebels, deserters, they all told the tale. The dumbest warship in the galaxy had burned an armada to ash, and so we became legend, but legends cut both ways with every system that celebrated us. Another cursed our name. Alien worlds declared blood oaths, promising to hunt the Redeemer until her hull was scattered across the stars, even within humanity. Admirals whispered of us as a danger, worse than the coalition itself. A ship they could not control, a captain they could not leash, a story they could not kill, and stories once loosed live forever. One night, as the crew slept in the smoke-filled hammocks of the lower decks, I stood alone on the ruined bridge. The stars stretched endless, cold and merciless. Riker limped in, his arm bound, his face scarred. Thinking of turning back, he asked. No, I said. He nodded, lowering himself into the chair beside me. Good. Because I don't think she'll let us. He ran a hand along the broken railing, the steel blackened with fire. She wants to fight. She's too dumb to know when to die. I looked at him, at the ruined ship around us, at the stars beyond, and I realized he was right. The Redeemer wasn't just steel. She wasn't just men. She was the spirit of every human who had ever been told they were weak, foolish, doomed. She was defiance, made into fire, and fire doesn't ask permission to burn. So maybe we died there in that graveyard, consumed by our own fury. Maybe the Redeemer's last scream was her tombstone, and all that remains is the story. Or maybe we survived, limping into the void, a half-dead ghost ship, still hunting, still burning, still waiting for the next fleet, arrogant enough to think we can be killed. The truth doesn't matter anymore, because in every bar, in every trench, in every colony that whispers in the dark, men tell the story the same way of the dumbest warship in the galaxy, the ship that should never have flown, the ship that refused to die, and whether she still burns out there or not, the galaxy will never forget her name, the Redeemer.